Hello to each of you, and welcome to the Zander channel. Here, I help people get out of their head and establish and maintain coherence to our heart, even if you're a man. Everything vibrates. Everything has a frequency. The universe, the earth, you, your words, your feelings, such as hatred and love, dis-ease, such as cancer. Even money has a vibration. You can change your vibration with thoughts and feelings. And this is my path to happiness, joy, and love. And I invite you to subscribe and join me in this journey towards peace, joy, and happiness. This particular video is on the Schumann Resonance, 101 and 201. Is the Schumann Resonance rising? I will have to say no, as a spoiler alert. In this video, I explain why. This is a conglomeration or a bunch of different master's theses papers that I have put together throughout the internet, and it's taken me a great deal of time to do so, which is why I haven't been posting videos as of late. This is thanks to Justin DeCamps and Iona Miller mostly, and a few others as I go through and thank them and cite them as references. Now, Iona Miller wrote this extensive research paper discussing the Schumann resonance. Now, while it might be challenging to review this kind of information, I highly recommend doing so because it provides essential first-hand knowledge needed to understand the energetic nature of existence. Bear with me a bit. I do have an upgraded, or I haven't upgraded my brain in order to understand a lot of this stuff. So bear with me, please. There is one thread to this paper that will likely be controversial, which is that the Schumann resonance is not rising, as many have suggested for decades. Now, however, before reacting to the statement, please take time to understand the evidence at hand and know that the general principle of energetic shifting is still valid, as I will attempt to explain. There are numerous images of Schumann resonance readings circulating the internet that are cited as examples of its rising. So in order to understand what's represented in these graphs, we'll briefly discuss the Schumann resonance and how it's produced. The space between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere is an approximately 50 to 375 mile thick layer of non-luminous plasma or charged atmospheric gas. It forms an electromagnetic resonance cavity with a potential resonant frequency range known as the Schumann resonance. More specifically, the Schumann ResonanceS, as in more than one. This is also known as the Earth ionosphere waveguide system. The Schumann resonance modes also correspond directly to the brainwave frequencies such as alpha, theta, gamma, and delta. Lightning is the most common source of energy for what is known as exciting the Schumann resonance because it acts like an antenna, radiating pulses of electromagnetic energy into the extremely low frequency range that is resonant within the ionosphere. It moves outwardly along the Earth's surface and atmosphere like a pebble hitting a pond. This rings the cavity like a bell, which appears as an excitation pulse or energy blips on monitoring stations or a continuous line for longer spans of time. Much like the sound of a loud guitar plugged into an amplifier, it rings a snare drum nearby, or a loud sound in a house that shakes the windows, or the sound of an echo in a valley or in a canyon. The atmosphere rings like a bell when it's excited, but the ringing is electromagnetic instead of sonic. So the resonant cavity itself, or the physical space between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere, creates the Schumann resonances, an electromagnetic spectrum or a scale. The only way to change this frequency range is to change the size of the Earth itself, or change the size of the ionosphere. But these two factors remain fairly consistent over time, which means that the baseline resonances themselves do not change. However, the cavity is not perfect, and there are various factors that can alter the ionosphere's size and shape, which have a very small effect on the frequencies within the scale, but it usually stays within the scale. The Schumann resonances are a series of potentiated frequencies with a baseline of 7.83 Hertz, ascending in harmonic progression up the electromagnetic spectrum ranges to 14.3, 20.8, 27.3, and 33.8 Hertz, which is the first 4 modes. The higher the Hertz value, the shorter the wavelength, and the more energy dense the waveform is. The important thing to understand is that these frequencies are potentiated, which means they do not ring or sound until the atmosphere is struck, like a drum. Consider a music analogy, another one. A piano is a device that produces a sound wave when a key is depressed on the keyboard, striking a string held in tension with a hammer. If no keys are depressed, the piano does not make any sound. You can't hear any of the notes, although they have the potential to make a sound. So if the piano is at rest, when no one is playing, then all the frequencies that correspond to these keys are potentiated. They are there waiting to make a sound but have not been struck yet. The Schumann resonance is similar in that each frequency band is quiet until something hits it, and most often are the lightning strikes. What does this have to do with the Schumann resonance not rising? The important this information is important because the thing that we call, or the things or the frequencies we call the Schumann resonances, is kind of a map of what is happening to the atmosphere. It's a mathematically derived prediction that says when the atmosphere is struck, it should produce frequencies in a certain range. Now let's interpret some of the graphs or data plots of the Schumann excitation. Now this is a 2-hour spectrogram between the hours of 2100 and 2200 UTC for the 11th of October 2008. This spectrogram is the first 4 resonances, and they're labeled off to the left there, right? And the 4th is extremely hard to see based on the device that's recording. Now, again, this is using an ELF receiver pictured with about 300-foot long wire on an L configuration. So this image, we see a measurement taken by an amateur scientist who wanted to confirm the Earth cavity theories at a personal level. The y-axis represents a frequency in Hertz, and the x-axis is time. This is one of the many types of Schumann resonance data sets that can be found online, but there are others, as we will see later on. Interpreting the graph, notice the bands marked mode 1 through 4. These are the Schumann resonances ringing as they are struck by lightning and other sources. Now, because the wavelengths are so long, as we'll see in the imperfections of the resonant cavity, the lines in the graph are not well defined, more like hazy speed bumps. And the 7.83 Hertz value is the most visible because it's the most excited or energized, which makes it the loudest because the lightning occurs more frequently. With this information in hand, you have the ability now to interpret the Schumann resonance graphs yourself. The bright patches in the graph correspond to energy intensity. So the brighter the area, the more energy is coming through. As in the other graph. Where is that damn thing? There. When spikes in energy are recorded at ranges higher than the baseline of 7.83 Hertz, it appears as a bright burst on the graph, such as these. Okay. In this plot from the 13th of November 2014, a large-scale excitation event caused the 4 modes mentioned earlier, 7.83, 14.3, 20.8, 27.3, and 33.8 Hertz, to spike in activity. The right-hand side of the graph, these spikes in energy in some kind of excitation event, which energized frequency ranges all the way up to 32 Hertz. The fact that the resonances were excited is what makes the spike appear in the graph. However, the Schumann resonance scale, which is the potential set of frequencies, has not changed. It appears to be this in itself is the source of confusion because all the white outness. Now, side note, speaking of the white that you see, the white patches above are examples of the sensor used to gather the data being overloaded due to the intensity energy excitation event. This is similar to what happens when attempting to film the sun on a brightly lit object with a camera that is not capable of handling the light intensity, whiting out the image. Or such as a speaker in your car and you crank the stereo all the way up and it blows the speaker out and now it's all distorted. The device cannot handle the intensity of the frequency, although the frequency itself is still the same. You turn up the volume, you blow the speaker. That's generally what happens. They're very, very sensitive equipment that records the ELF wavelength of the Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance is. So that's where the source of confusion is. The inference is that the baseline frequency of the Schumann resonance spiked to 24 Hertz as marked by the red arrow, but that is not correct. Notice in the graph that all of the Schumann resonances of 7.83, 14.3, 20.8, 27.3, and 33.8 are all excited and fall within the standard frequency ranges calculated by Schumann. So it means that the Schumann resonance range itself has not changed. The atmosphere was excited and it rattled the resonant cavity. Now the value marked by the red arrow, or close to it, right, is the fourth mode at 27.3 Hertz, which is a frequency that is definitely within the Schumann range. So if the Schumann resonance scale really is rising, as some have claimed, the evidence cited as proof is absolutely not valid. Thus, the best conclusion to draw, based on the available data presented herein and everywhere else on the internet, is that it's not rising at all. It's being excited. So while the range itself has not shifted up, the energy within the system has spiked at times to a very high level, and that will affect life on Earth. Now, back to the music analogy, think of a drum. If you tap the drum lightly, you produce a note. When you hit the drum in the same spot, but harder, it's the same note. It's just louder or a higher volume and has more power. So what else can excite the atmosphere and cause higher ranges to ring instead of just the lightning? How about cosmic rays? Coronal mass ejections from the sun, right? Lunar cycles, the solar wind, and most strikingly, artificial EM sources from outside the Earth through the universe, or other sources like the HARP program. Okay. All have the ability to excite the Schumann cavity to produce spikes in the higher ranges, as this video will detail with some precision. So what does that mean for the notion of energetic ascension and evolution? Well, for those concerned, the good news is that the only thing this changes is your understanding of what is actually happening. Events themselves are still influencing us and doing what they do. The understanding of energetic evolution is dependent upon the comprehension of entrainment or sympathetic resonance. Our bodies are in harmony with the Earth's electromagnetic field and output, which in turn harmonics with the sun, which in turn is harmonic with the galaxy, and so on. This means that literally the entire cosmos is playing a part in what happens here on Earth and with you, because you also vibrate. Let's go up here. So this chart I'll leave up for a little while so you can read through this, so you can understand a little bit something more on the Schumann resonance. This is a little bit more detailed out so you can actually pick it out for the different color ranges and all that. Okay. Now, what we can say with a high degree of certainty is that the energy pouring in from all sources is having a marked effect on our bodies and minds, and this is unrefuted and confirmed in mainstream science. It's just that most of these papers that I found are master's theses and not from anybody in the actual community. This is people trying to get their education certified rather than actually counting on outside sources of income, which there are none for this type of pseudoscience, as they continually call it. There's no money in it because truth has no monetary value. Now, we also know that DNA is an antenna, receiving information via electromagnetic and scalar wave phenomenon that alters the behavior and expression of the body-mind system. Finally, solar and galactic cycles also play a major role in evolution, including human consciousness. And there's what NASA calls the local fluff, which is an energetic field that is influencing the solar system. All these data points, properly understood and contextualized, suggest the energetic broth that the Earth is swimming in is changing. And via the concept of entrainment, we know that changing the information contained within a field alters the behavior of the things contained within that field. Thus, spikes in the Schumann resonance signify that the energy is entering the Earth, and with it, information that will unquestionably play a role in evolution. So think of the Schumann resonance as a frequency just like a radio. Well, what is the radio station telling you, or which song is being played on that particular frequency range? I hope that this and what follows sheds new light on the understanding of the often misunderstood topic of the rising Schumann resonance, along with many other fascinating aspects of how what has been called the Earth's heartbeat plays a major role in our lives and, quite frankly, the entire cosmos. Moving on. The Schumann resonance, SR, is defined as a set of resonant modes or spectrum peaks between 7.83 and 45 Hertz, some say 53 Hertz, an extremely low frequency portion of the Earth's electromagnetic field spectrum. The fundamental Schumann resonance is a standing wave in the atmosphere at around 8 Hertz. The human brain waves are entrained to this pulse, emitting theta and alpha frequencies in the same EMF region. Necessary for mammalian growth and repair, such as signals in guide waves in the geomagnetic cavity, are the meta-drivers of biological processes, homeostasis, and adaptation. We cannot thrive without these frequencies. Also, cells respond between 3 to 25 Hertz. Okay? Frequencies outside this range have little or no effect. Cell membranes oscillate or resonate to create a biological window. Now, each window has a measurable and a definable frequency, amplitude, and a phase that has discrete ranges projected on different characteristics of the wave. Active windows facilitating information transfer and adaptive activities. Changing windows creates functional changes called phase changes that help us adapt to the environmental changes. Outside the Earth's magnetic field for extended periods, early cosmonauts lost 80% of their bone density. Michael Persinger developed a Schumann wave generator at 7.83 Hertz specifically for space flights that overcame this side effect. Geomagnetic anomalies can amplify local Schumann resonance in certain geological conditions, potentially stimulating coherent resonance in alpha brainwave, forming a tuned system. Solar geomagnetic interactions correlated with the sunspots and solar flares significantly perturb the Schumann resonance. Solar events release cosmic rays, which enhance the ionization of the D layer up to a factor of 10, with sudden ionospheric disturbances, or SIDs. Such ELF signals affects tissues, electric gradients of the ULF and ELF oscillating signals, involving nonlinear resonant absorption of ULF and ELF oscillating signals into systems that use natural ion oscillation signals in the same frequency range. ULF and ELF signals can significantly alter cellular calcium ion fluxes and EEGs in brain tissue. So we concur with Louis Hainsworth's pioneering research on the health correlations of Schumann resonance, and postulates, along with Picatin and Sidorov, that Schumann resonance may be the substrate for a radar-typed extrasensory perception mechanism common to all organisms. Schumann resonance forms a sort of global guidance system for life. Resonant absorption of an oscillating signal and reaction is presumed at most brainwaves, as most brainwaves fall within the first 5 Schumann resonance modes at 0 to 35 Hertz. Frequency matching amplifies even weak signals, even in the presence of other strong static and oscillating fields. It is vital to brain-to-cell and cell-to-cell communications. Also notice off to the chart that you're observing there, the brainwave frequencies and the states. Also below, that you're probably wondering about the color codes. Down below in the Schumann resonance area where you have the chart, the amplitudes are off to the right a little bit further, showing the types of blockages or healing effects or light cooling effects. The higher the amplitude in this particular instance is better for raising the vibration of yourself and also everything around you. Now, geospace is the term that relates to the solar terrestrial environments and the relevant spaces occupied by Earth and her fields. Schumann resonance, global electromagnetic resonance excited by tropical lightning, is one of the natural EM fields in our planetary environment. Now, it's not just the tropical, but it's mostly in the tropical region. On an average, there are about 200 scattered lightning strikes taking place every second on the Earth. But resonances can be excited by any electromagnetic disturbance in the atmosphere, including geomagnetic or micropulsations. Solar or geomagnetic activity leads to the changes of the dielectric permeability in the Schumann cavity. The fundamental Schumann resonance mode roughly corresponds to a wave with a wavelength equal to the circumference of the Earth. It has existed since the ionosphere has been formed and lightning began, which would probably predate animal life. If a radio wave circulates the globe, Schumann resonance occurs. When the phase delay of that wave equals 2 pi, Schumann resonance is a global phenomenon, while transverse resonance is a local issue. If the wave bounces between the ground and the ionosphere, it is trapped between the two mirrors, kindling the transverse resonance. Transverse resonance is predominantly a local phenomenon containing information on the local height and conductivity of the lower ionosphere and on nearby thunderstorm activity. Waves in the ULF range or the below the first Schumann resonance of 7.83 Hertz will have wavelengths much larger than the circumference of the Earth. ULF waves at approximately 1 millihertz to 1 Hertz play a major role in propagating energy throughout the magnetospheric system. At the lowest end of this frequency band, the wavelength of ULF waves is comparable to the entire magnetosphere. In this frequency range, the global structure of the magnetosphere can lead to global cavity resonances and waveguide modes. The structure of these modes is determined by the gradients of the alpha and the fast modes speeds the magnetospheric system. That information is from researcher Lysak. The alpha system is named after Alphen, who is a conductor, so it's a musical grade system. Schumann resonance is not the internally generated resonant frequency of our planet, which is 10 to 11 Hertz, as Tesla had discovered later. Earth itself emits a predominantly infrared wave from its core and re-radiated solar energy it absorbs. Schumann fields are weak compared to the Earth's much larger static geomagnetic field. The The Schumann resonance is an electromagnetic oscillations, or the Earth's global electric circuit, consisting of the frequencies that play through the ionospheric cavity, which is the space between the ground and the ionosphere, as in a plasma wave, or as waves within the plasma. It rings like a tuning fork. So the ionosphere is a highly conductive region of the cosmic plasma, which is a sea of free electrons or ions. Earth's cavity responds to solar fluctuations like a tuning fork tuned to 7.83 Hertz. The solar terrestrial environment is modulated by solar cycles, which affect the global climate and all organisms in the biosphere. Interference patterns are the transducers of energy, which at its most fundamental is described as information. Earth functions like a planet-sized electrical capacitor or a condenser storing the electrical potential. So, inducted propagation, the space between the Earth and the ionosphere, is a dissipative closed cavity between 50 to 375 miles that can sustain a quasi-standing waves at wavelengths of planetary dimensions. Electrical conductivity in atmosphere is driven largely by cosmic rays that generate a torsion field. Conductivity increases exponentially with altitude because the lower atmosphere buffers the collision frequency. The ionosphere begins at about 50 miles out from the Earth's surface, extends 375 miles. It consists of charged particles. This highly dynamic region is constantly exposed to harsh ultraviolet radiation from the sun. It breaks down the molecules and atoms. Highly charged ions and free electrons therefore fill the ionospheric layers, creating a spectral power station. I think I got another guy in here that talks about spectral power. Yeah, that guy. So, through inducted propagation, lightning radiates broadband EM fields that spread laterally into the cavity. Now, global thunderstorms excite the Schumann resonances, which can be observed at 7.8, 14, 20, 26, 33, 39, and 45 Hertz. So, changes occurring in these frequencies are quite normal and do not indicate anything out of the ordinary. All of these frequencies fluctuate around their nominal values. The resonant spectrum is a superposition of global lightning discharge. For these resonant values to change, the planet would have to change in diameter. So the Schumann resonance modes, like other low-frequency modes, are able to leak into the ionosphere, particularly at night when plasma density is lower. So using measurements from the Communication/Navigation Outage Forecasting System, or CNOFS, the satellite, I postulate for the, I don't know if it's the first time or not, but the Schumann resonance signatures detected well beyond the upper boundary of the cavity. So these results offer new means for investigating atmospheric electricity, tropospheric, ionospheric coupling mechanisms related to the lightning activity and wave propagation in the ionosphere. The detection of the Schumann resonances in the ionosphere calls for revisions to the existing models of extremely low-frequency wave propagation in the surface ionosphere cavity. And that's from Simoes. Frequencies describe periodic cycles per second, measured in hertz. Such frequencies have wrapped Earth's biosphere since its inception. Now, normal daily variation ranges plus or minus 0.5 Hertz. Another normal source of fluctuation is coronal mass ejections from the sun that leads to proton bombardment. Bursts may increase the Schumann resonance frequency by about 3.5%. These effects are explained by changes in the height and dielectric permeability of the Earth ionosphere cavity. In the early mid-1950s, geophysicist Schumann suggested that electromagnetic signals might circulate at extremely low frequencies in the electrically resonant cavity between the Earth and the ionosphere. And it turns out he was right. These signals came to be called the Schumann Resonances, or Schumann's Resonances. One major component was originally predicated at a frequency of about 10 hertz. In 1959, it was measured to be slightly different. Meanwhile, the military co-opted the discovery for using ELF signals in submarine communications. The first mode of these circulating signals has an average value of 7.8 hertz, with a typical diurnal range from 7.2 to 8.8. And the second mode has an average value of 14.1 hertz and a range from 13.2 to 15.8 hertz. These match the brainwave theta rhythm and the beta rhythm very nicely. The blank range between the two modes is a very reasonable match with the normal frequency range of the human alpha rhythm between 8 to 12 hertz or cycles. Additionally, it was found that there is a minimum, or zero, power circulating in the Earth ionospheric cavity at 10.4 hertz, which is virtually an exact match for the average value of the alpha rhythm. The existence of these natural signals and the close relationship of their frequencies of oscillation to key human rhythms were unknown to senior neurologists and mental health specialists as late as 1975. But recent years have seen escalating interest in the geophysics in both the public and academic sectors, including its effects on our psychobiology. Now, a persistent New Age meme was begun by self-styled expert Greg Braden without any accurate citations to promote his commercial idiosyncratic notions. It is entirely fallacious thought it had become widespread on the internet. Now, in quotes, the resonance of the Earth, or the Schumann resonance, has been 7.8 hertz for thousands of years, and since 1980 it has risen over 12 hertz. This means that 16 hours now equate to a 24-hour day, so time is speeding up. Recent reports set the rate at over 11 cycles and climbing, and science doesn't know why or what to make of it. End quote. So this is demonstrably untrue, as Lone Tree's continual monitoring has shown. It is not true, it was never true, and it is becoming true even at the peak of the current solar cycle. Furthermore, for it to happen would require the Earth's shrinking or the speed of light changing dramatically. And this is from Lone Tree and Miller's information. And, by the way, Lone Tree is one of Greg Braden's research assistants in this category. Also, the Schumann resonance is possibly receiving more information, or we're downloading information, or whatever you want to call it, based on the Earth's it's possible that the Earth's position in the cosmos, which has never been in this area before, we are moving into a new age, or a new area of the cosmos, or the galaxy, whichever you want to call it. So could that affect it? Well, I already told you that it will. So, in the physiological frequencies in a coherent resonance and well-being. So we are bathed basically in a sea of naturally low-frequency electromagnetic fields with from conception until death. The brain is an electromagnetic system synchronized by the Schumann resonance signal that is continuously stabilizes the brainwave activity and the heart activity, since the heart is the electromagnet resonator of the human body. The frequencies of the EEG brainwaves coincides with the range of the Schumann resonance activity. Blackman in 1990 established that external electromagnetic ELF signals induce altered neuronic calcium ion effluxes in the brain tissue. Stable synchronizing of the brain's electromagnetic systems underpins thinking, emotion, memory, and intelligence. Schumann resonance modulates the set point of our consciousness and our biology. Living tissues detect, absorb, and utilize electromagnetic signals within some frequency ranges and completely ignore other frequencies naturally encountered in the frequency spectrum. So we are basically in tune with the Schumann resonances, which drive brain wave ELF patterns in a set range of grouped frequencies. which some describe as antenna-like qualities in brainwaves 8 to 12 cycle range. Let's see, I got another one for you guys. There. So our brains detect and respond to the Schumann resonance signals throughout nonlinear resonant matchings of frequency, altering optimal melatonin and serotonin cycles, balancing those cycles. Cardiac, neurological, reproductive health, and mortality. Solar storms modulate daily variations of the D region, reflected in daily vibration or daily variation in the Schumann resonance signal strength. This primal lightning-driven Schumann resonance pulse calibrates us and enhances our physical and mental well-being. We are all in tune to that wave, which correlates with a relaxed and creative mind. So when we are in tune to the earth, we are relaxed and we are very creative. In the alpha state in the middle of the chart off to your left there. So that natural resonance helps us achieve our optimal brainwave state. But this atmosphere to human linkage is disrupted by electromagnetic smog of today's ultra technology and many other things such as the HARP project. Now, researcher Cherry in 2002 found that Schumann resonance signals is extremely highly correlated with solar geomagnetic activity, or S-GMA. Indices of sunspots number and the KP index. The physical mechanism is the ionospheric D region ion/electron density that varies with the SGMA and forms the upper boundary of the resonant cavity in which the Schumann resonance signal is formed. His evidence supports the notion that Schumann resonance signals are the SGMA biophysical mechanism, primarily through the melatonin mechanism. He therefore identifies the SGMA as a natural hazard with biological and health effects. Away from artificial noise and thunderstorms, Schumann resonance is the main component of the natural EM background between 6 and 50 Hz. The fundamental Schumann frequency fluctuates between 7 and 8.5 Hz. Such frequencies vary from geological location to location, and they could even have a naturally occurring interruptions. Schumann's successor, which is his research assistant, Dr. Herbert Koenig, demonstrated a connection between the Schumann resonance and brain rhythms. Koenig compared human EEG recordings with the natural electromagnetic fields in the environment, finding that 7.83 Hz is the dominant brainwave rhythm of all mammals in the alpha or the resting state. When the brain resonates with Schumann resonance, energy information is transmitted so that it appears to coordinate with psychophysical systems. Louis B. Hainsworth of Western Australia was among the first researchers to recognize the relationship of brainwave frequencies to the naturally circulating rhythms and rhythmic signals of the Schumann resonance. Hainsworth shared this data with Dr. Robert O. Becker, who is a noted electromagnetic pollution expert, and to Harvard neurologists as early as 1975. Becker included it in his 3 classic books on electromagnetism and life, 1982, 1985, and 1990. Pardon. Robert C. Beck, another EMF researcher, found that the human body has numerous very specific frequencies that trigger production of different endorphins, beta endorphins, catecholamines, enkephalines, dynorphins, proteins, and stem cells. That's the food, that's the Schumann resonance, there we go. He found about 250 different key frequencies that trigger the body to produce its own healing chemicals. Beck studied about 150 different brainwave stimulation devices and other effects experimentally. Bentov found that several other interlocking resonating systems in the body were activated by this steady 7 to 8 hertz activity during meditation. The upper part of the body has a resonant frequency of about 7 hertz under normal conditions. Bentov noted that additional resonance effects are likely resulting from this phased interlock phenomenon. Other systems besides brainwaves are affected by the Schumann resonance, as quoted in Smith Ludwig in 1987. They have measured and compared a large number of the ELF rhythms in human subjects with resonant frequencies in homeopathic remedies using a spectrum analyzer. Bentov reported that Schumann calculated the Earth's ionospheric cavity resonance frequencies at 10.6, 18.3, and 25.9 hertz, and he reported more recent values calculated by Toomey and Polk at 7.8, 14.1, 20.3, 26.4, and 32 hertz. Ludwig found a number of frequencies have been found to be common to all the subjects and relate to the specific physiological function. For example, the frequency of 0.1 hertz relates to the circulatory system. 7.8 hertz relates to the hippocampus. 10 hertz to the circadian rhythms. 33 hertz to the lymphatic systems, from researcher Rofi. Now, also, in the other holistic methodologies, we do have the Electro-Herbalism frequency list, which, of course, let me fix this out. Here, sorry about that backdrop and the noise. Electro-Herbalism frequency list. This lists every dis-ease so far, and it is by Brian McInturff. This correlates all diseases, well, the ones that are noted herein, which is a compilation from all over the world. We're talking, just open up a page here, shingles, all the frequencies to correct that problem. Mold, different types of mold that you have within your body, because crackers have a lot of mold in them. Lyme disease, cancer, malaria, measles, rubella, fibromyalgia, breast tumor, benign, anthrax, diabetes, influenza, and the devices to find, record, and fix them. Also for the human body, we have Hulda Rutger Clark, PhD, neurological doctor. Cure for all diseases. Tells you basically there's two types of problems or dis-ease, and they stem from parasites and from pollution, as I discussed a little bit in this paper or in this video already, and further on down the way, as this is about a 2.5 hour vid. So I am not getting any money from these folks, but this is what I'm going to be quoting on this channel quite often. So, that being said, Oshman links healing energies to these rhythms of Earth's atmosphere. Robert C. Beck has used EEG recordings to study brainwave activities in healers from all over the world. Psychics, shamans, faith healers, Hawaiian kahuna practitioners of Wicca, etc. All these healers produced similar brainwave patterns when they were performing a healing. All healers registered a brainwave activity averaging around 7.8 to 8.0 cycles per second. Beck performed additional studies on some of the subjects and found that during healing moments, their brain waves became phase and frequency synchronized with the Earth's geoelectric micropulsations, or the Schumann resonances. This is from Dr. Oshman. Research has shown that Schumann resonances can modulate human health indicators such as blood pressure, cardiac and neurological disease, reaction time, neuroendocrine sensitivities, violence, and war. It also correlates with sunspot activity, mass human excitability, sociality, and climate change, according to Tchaikovsky, such as, I don't know, a riot, where they talk about the mob mind, right? If we talk about a global event, such as a pandemic of late, it disrupts the Schumann resonance. It's very affected by that. So, Sweetbert Ertel in 1997 in Bursts of Creativity Correlate with Solar Activity in the book examined an association between solar activity and oscillations in human creativity. His results showed that during increased solar activity, human creative activity also peaks. Tchaikovsky agreed that the influence on the human nervous system is greatest during peaks of emitted energy by the sun and radiation of the earth. Chemical bonds are magnetic bonds formed between adjacent atoms through paired electrons having opposite spins and thus attracted magnetically. In 1977, this phenomenon, or the relationship between the brainwave rhythms and the spectrum of the natural Earth's ELF signals, became the basis for Itzhak Bentov's popular book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, printed by Dutton in 1977. He also suggested geophysical correlates affect people's health, emotional balance, and spiritual well-being. Ancient cultures such as the Egyptians, the Hopi, ancient Indian, Mayan, Aztec, and Chinese correctly assumed that their collective behavior was influenced by the sun. Contemporary research confirms a relationship to human health and well-being. Even ESP or psi phenomenon is predicated on the assumption that all living things are interconnected and communicate with each other via biological and electromagnetic fields. Schumann resonance, anyone? Hainsworth sent up a clarion cry against hazardous EM pollution, whose continuous dangers pale in comparison to the threat of the technologies such as HAARP, or the High Frequency Active Aural Research Program, which sends violent pulsations into the Earth's ionosphere, potentially disrupting the entire electromagnetic shield of the planet and certainly affecting the whole biosphere and thus human welfare in general. So let's try not to block out the sun there, Bill Gates. Some research from Greg Braden has suggested that the frequency of the basic Schumann resonance has recently been rising in value, possibly threatening the whole biosphere. Human welfare and other evolutionary our evolutionary future. Okay, but this is totally unsubstantiated, fallacious disinformation. There is no evidence whatsoever of the Schumann resonance rising. The author's colleague, Ben Lonetree, has been monitoring the Schumann resonance daily for nearly 2 decades without any anomalous readings, providing the persistent New Age meme is undeniably bullshit. Note, through the HAARP, the resonances are seemingly artificially changed as long as at least one of the HAARP manipulators are active. That's right, there's more than one. Now, to explain further, think of a concert playing Mozart's Fifth Symphony. Right? Then, while that's playing, throw in a pulsating and violent rock song or a rap song on top of that. What do you get? It's a bit disruptive. I'm not trashing rock or rap. It's just different from the frequencies of the earth. Now, all biological processes are a function of electromagnetic field interactions. EM fields are the connecting link between the world of form and resonant patterns. They store gesalts or patterns of information. The bridge connecting solar system resonances and the brain frequencies resides in our human DNA helix, which co-evolved in the Earth's environment, or was made for specifically the Earth's environment. Electrical engineer Louis B. Hainsworth was among the first to suggest that human health is linked with geophysical parameters by way of the naturally occurring Schumann's ELF. His hypotheses identified naturally occurring features which determine the frequency spectrum of human brainwave rhythms, or the frequencies of naturally occurring electromagnetic signals circulating in the electrically resonant cavity bonded by the Earth between the Earth and the ionosphere, which they have governed or determined the evolution or development of the frequencies of operation to the principal human brainwave signals. In particular, the alpha rhythm is so placed that it can in no circumstances suffer an extensive interference from a naturally occurring signal. Hainsworth concluded that the frequencies of human brainwaves evolved in response to these signals. If his hypothesis is correct, conditions of evolutionary changes in human brainwave patterns have now been established. Furthermore, variations in these patterns can produce mild to disastrous health and behavioral changes. The nature of the applied stimulus makes it difficult to identify the responses directly, and they are most likely to occur in the form of a stress-related condition or conditions. They will therefore show up as drastic increases in mental disturbance, antisocial behavior, psychosomatic conditions, and neurological disturbances. Some electrical field phenomena have already been linked with abnormal cell growth and decrease in the immune competency. All these factors could be expected to lead to the appearance of new diseases, probably accompanied by a decline in the resistance to many minor infections and increase in the conditions related to abnormal cell development, including cancer, birth defects, and infertility, and an increase in the psychological disturbance problems or drug addictions and suicides. These existing psychobiological problems could be expected to increase in scale, but could be studied for deviations from normal alpha cycles of 10.4 Hz, with detectable changes in psychological characteristics and mental abilities. Hainsworth, therefore, strongly urged that the research into the widespread measurement of the natural Schumann resonance signals, frequency variations, and field strengths be carried out and compared with statistics for the incidence of heart attacks, suicide attempts, road accidents, social violence, domestic accidents, crimes, etc. So, studies are often conducted in this inferential way, i.e. Krippner and Persinger, searching these correlations between phenomena of Earth's lights and tectonic strain as reports of UFO sightings, abductions, reports, and other anomalous psychophysical experiences for an electromagnetic connection to the temporal lobe seizures. Now, light frequencies. Now we strongly suggest that I strongly suggest in these papers altogether, that correlations of broad changes in the modulations of Schumann resonance be studied in relationship to microwave radiation, ELF signals, and HARP for both immediate and long-term consequences. Not that the governments or the powers that be of the world are going to release HARP information, but that would be that would benefit humanity. So, I'm not sure which side they're on. Okay, We have discussed elsewhere the obvious ramifications such as EM pollution and the 10 to 50 hertz modulations on the human system. And that's through Miller in his book Synthetic Telepathy of 2001. We have also discussed the benefits for human well-being and relaxation from entraining with these natural rhythms in The Diamond Body of 1981. When a person is deeply relaxed, slow rhythmic sine wave patterns can be detected in both the EEG and in the heart aorta resonating oscillator in the 7 to 8 hertz range. Resonance occurs when the natural vibration frequency of a body is greatly amplified by the vibrations at the same frequency from another body. Oscillators alter the environment in a periodic manner. Thus, standing waves in the body, whether during meditation or relaxation or not, can be driven by a larger signal. Progressively amplified waveforms created by the resonance result in large oscillations in training other circuits in the body tuned to those specific frequencies. A hierarchy of frequencies thus couples our psychophysical selves to the harmonic frequencies of the electrical charge of the earth, which naturally pulses at the same frequencies. Thus, this is hardly a coincidence, as we are adaptive products of our environment. So, basically, being an oscillator yourself, and since the tuning fork theory, you could attune yourself to another human being through a hug or some such close oscillation, just by being in proximity. That being said, you can receive a higher vibration from an individual, or you can receive a lower vibration from another individual. Whether or not you wish for that frequency to affect you is, well, it's your choice. Either back off or don't let it affect you through your thought processes. So, just another note on the chart that I put up, or the photo. When the Schumann resonance spikes in power, we may feel the effects of this. Annette Dale, who is the research coordinator at the HeartMath Institute, states that there is no doubt that the electromagnetic conditions on our planet are changing. That doesn't mean the Schumann resonance is rising, though. They're changing. The region of space we are in is not the same as it was 50 or even 5 years ago, as our solar system spirals through our galactic environment. Our spiritual and physical evolution is being fueled by solar and cosmic activity and many other energetic influences. We are living within a transitional period between extensive cycles with differing energy signatures, and our civilization is adapting to a new consciousness. So, the frequencies and the earth itself are changing, right? And we are changing with it, as we are adaptive products of our environment. That doesn't mean that the Schumann resonance is actually changing. The radio station is not changing. The information that's being put across those specific frequencies is changing and is louder. Now, our planet is surrounded by a layer of electrically charged particles called the ionosphere. The lower layer of the ionosphere is roughly 60 to 80 kilometers or 40 to 50 miles from the crust, and this charged layer is known to reflect radio waves. Bombardment by HARP signals pushes out this boundary layer, thus altering the natural pulsating rhythm of the entire Schumann resonance. Natural fluctuations in frequency occur daily by the lunar month and in response to solar flares. Since the ionosphere is a highly charged layer, it forms a so-called capacitor with the Earth. This means there's a difference in electrical potential between the two, as Nikola Tesla has stated many times in his free energy patents, which patent prevents people from selling items that are related to the patent. It doesn't mean you can't make one for yourself and keep it for yourself. Or make one and then give it to your buddy for Christmas or whatever. But you can't sell it. You can't make money off of it. Now, the Earth being negatively charged and the ionosphere being positively charged, that's the difference in the electrical potential between them, right? The potential varies somewhat, but is around 200 volts per meter, cubic meter. This is a fundamental type of electrical generator. The solar winds interacting with the upper atmospheric rotation acts as the collector and the brushes of a generator. The lower atmosphere can be seen as a storage battery for this gradient potential. The electromagnetic field around the Earth can be viewed as a stiff jelly. So when our bodies move and vibrate, these movements are transmitted to the environment and vice versa. These fields not only impinge on our bodies, they also affect the charges inside of our bodies. When we're standing on the ground under normal conditions, we are grounded. Our body then acts as a sink for the electrostatic field and actually distorts the force lines somewhat. The human body also has its own electrostatic field about itself. Static electricity, folks. Now, these field lines are the result of various biochemical reactions in the body. This resonant biofield couples us to the isoelectric field of the planet. And that's research from 1981 by Miller and Miller. In 1957, German physicist Dr. W.O. Schumann calculated the Earth's ionosphere cavity resonance frequencies, which were named after him. He fixed the most predominant standing wave at about 7.83 hertz. A tune system consists of at least two oscillators of identical resonant frequencies. If one oscillator starts emitting, the other will be activated by the signal very shortly. Tuning forks. In the process of resonance, entrainment or kindling or igniting the resonance phenomena among the neurons, it becomes obvious that in deep meditation, when waves of alpha and theta rhythms cascade across the entire brain, a resonance is possible between the human being and the planet. Energy and information which are embedded in a field are transferred. Perhaps the planet communicates with us in this primal language of frequencies, which also are communicated to our cells in the way our brains communicate with our cellular structures. According to Hainsworth, the influence of naturally occurring Schumann's resonance signals on brainwave pattern evolution is formally stated to show that lower power electrical fields could produce an evolutionary change. The electrical fields produced by modern electrotechnology are then possible sources of evolutionary change. The characteristics of some forms which might result should be considered. Some fields might inhibit survival of existing forms. Because of a lack of available data, precise measurements are lacking and must therefore be quantitatively valueless. Technology not only will change, but is changing human evolution, and not necessarily for the better. Only extensive investigation of the naturally occurring signals will give any lead into showing what results may occur. And getting something like an MMR or some sort of vaccine that changes your RNA and, in essence, your DNA is not going to help human evolution. Let us remember that the human is not smarter than our Creator. Let me say that again. A bunch of people who make a lot of money in our suffering as a whole planet, it's not in their best interest for us to evolve. The possibility exists that human health is linked with geophysical parameters by the way of naturally occurring Schumann's resonances. A number of attempts have been made to discover the correlation through geomagnetic and ionospheric storms. The correlation comes through the biological fact that the human's system is apparently sensitive to such low-power ELF signals. Now, we don't know what the range of such a correlation might actually be because nobody's done the research on it or funded the research on it, let me say. The frequency values of the Schumann resonance signals are determined by the effective dimensions of the cavity between the Earth and the ionosphere. Thus, any event or events which change the dimensions will change the resonant frequencies. Right? As Hainsworth warned earlier, such events could be ionospheric storms and could even result from a man-made ionospheric disturbance, such as the much speculated February 2021 storm in the United States, which the eye of the storm was somewhere around in Texas and never moved. Or something generated by the HARP project. Anyways, by the HARP system. Geomagnetic storms are the magnetic changes produced by ionospheric storms and are thus associated with the conditions capable of changing the Schumann resonance signals. However, although such storms can produce these changes, measurement of these parameters cannot give any indication of whether the resonance signals have changed to a value outside of their normal range or not. Since the undisturbed state of the ionosphere corresponds to the normal Schumann resonance patterns, the ionospheric disturbances are likely to produce abnormal patterns, but will not necessarily do so in all cases. Now, if the biological response is linked to the Schumann's resonance signals, this will reduce the apparent link with geomagnetic or ionospheric data. Now, trying to determine the relationships between geophysical and biological conditions can become extremely complex. The frequencies of the Schumann resonance signals change with ionospheric conditions. These conditions change diurnally, seasonally, and with variations in solar activity, which in turn varies with the 11-year sunspot cycle and also with the 27 to 29-day lunar cycle, mainly during sunspot minimum periods. Lunar tidal changes in the height and thickness of the layers could also sometimes affect the cavity dimensions and hence the Schumann's frequencies. So could powerful ELF signals from the HARP system. Right. Now, it should be borne in mind that if some signal conditions are harmful, then other conditions may be very, very beneficial. This means that if, for example, seasonal and tidal conditions have resulted in the signal being in a biologically disturbed state, then the advent of a solar flare could result in changes in the signal, bringing them into a biologically beneficial state, and of course the converse could also occur. So, again, if we are so sensitive to ELF signals, right, then when these factors are considered, we would expect to get confusion if we try to link any effect with geophysical changes. For instance, there could be incidences of classic states of lunacy in some years if damaging signals coincide with full moons. Then in other years, the observations and analyses would show that the effects were not lunar. And an analysis of the correlation between the incidence of ionospheric disturbances and the rate of admissions to Heathcote Hospital in Perth, Western Australia, for about a 3-year total indicated that when a disturbance occurred, then the admission rate changed. Probability of the association being random was to the order of 2,000 to 1 against. However, the fact that sometimes the rate went up and sometimes down showed that the ionospheric storms changed the rate of incidences of mental disturbance in a way that is consistent with that change being dependent on the actual cause being linked to variations in the Schumann resonance signals. At this point, Hainsworth decided to concentrate on trying to get some observational work going on measuring the Schumann resonance signals. Hainsworth's setup used a 2,000 turn 1 meter square antenna and another of 1/3 meter square, plus amplifiers to handle signals from 0 to 30 hertz. His amplified Schumann signals were analyzed in a laboratory. On one occasion, these signals dropped to 0 amplitude when a solar flare occurred. It did not start recovering for an hour and a half thereafter, and since it was originally just under 7 hertz, the amplitude or the value came back at only just over 6 hertz. So his next step would have been to develop a wave analyzer to try to pick out the individual signals, but the failing health of both himself and his wife prevented this, so his research is actually currently incomplete. Nobody has picked up his research. I wonder why. EM frequencies and human response. Hainsworth posted a series of questions, yet all of which answered with a resounding yes. This should lead us to the new direction of extreme caution towards introducing new EM or ELF sources and ionospheric changes in our environment. He presented his data in 2 papers, which are referenced at the website nwbotanicals.org. nwbotanicals.org. The questions are as follows. Does the human biological system contain, use, or generate any forms of electrical signal? Does it respond to any of these signals? 3. Does it respond to an audible signal at these frequencies? 4. Does it respond to optical signals at these frequencies? 5. Do human signals change with psychological or mental states, such as stress or problem solving? 6. Does the human system respond to any very, very low power electromagnetic signals? So, brainwaves have only been studied since about the mid-1920s, and these signals form that is apparent most widely known as identified is the alpha rhythm. The frequency of this signal varies from individual to individual, but it lies between about 7 to 8 hertz and 12 hertz, with an average value of 10.5 hertz. Theta and beta rhythm signals also occur and are identifiable by EEGs below the 8 hertz and above the 12 hertz frequencies. Since the discovery and measurement of these signals, a great deal of effort has been devoted to trying to work out how they originated in the first place and what determines their frequencies of operation. Now, Hainsworth argued that up to the end of 1979, no long-term systematic measurements of any great value were being made of the Schumann's resonance signals. Measurements were being made only intermittently for the purposes of obtaining research data for use by postgraduate geophysicists in constructing historic mathematical models of the ionosphere. It follows from this that until long after the end of 1979, no figures on these signals were available. Consequently, no expert can produce numerical evidence to support any objection to Hainsworth's original hypothesis, since the only numerical values available are those favoring it. So, some more questions by Hainsworth. Number 7. Has any evidence ever been obtained to indicate that the human system is totally unaffected by externally applied electromagnetic fields? Take your happy self up to the X-ray area of a hospital. See how that affects you. Number 8. Have any measurement programs ever been attempted to show whether the human system is A, totally unaffected, B, always affected, or C, sometimes affected by naturally or artificially occurring electromagnetic signals. Has the existence of such signals having a close relationship with human biological signal frequencies been known for many years? Depends on your definition of many. 10. How have those relationships been studied with adequate protocols in any detail? Now, Schumann's resonances are actually observed by experiment, occurring at several harmonic frequencies between 6 and 50 cycles per second, which is 1 cycle equals 1 hertz. Now, specifically, they are found at 7.8, 14, 20, 26, 33, 39, and 49 hertz, with a daily variation of around plus or minus 0.5 hertz. Only as long as the properties of Earth's electromagnetic cavity remain about the same do these frequencies remain the same. Cycles may vary somewhat due to the ionospheric response to solar cycle activity and properties of the atmosphere and magnetosphere. Projects such as HARP, which heat up or blast out the ionosphere, pose a potential threat of catastrophic proportions to the interactive system and to humans and the collective consciousness. Now, measuring brainwaves by EEG. The resonant cavity formed between the ionosphere and the Earth produces rhythmic waves capable of entraining and phase locking with human brainwaves and probably other mammals' brainwaves. Even at the turn of this millennia, Hainsworth seems to have been unfamiliar with extensive work in brainwave research in neurology, hypnotherapy, biofeedback, and neural feedback. This research includes extensive experiments in frequency following response, or FFR, and relating brainwaves and brainwave deficiencies to psychobiological states. The brain is a massive source of ELF signals that get transmitted throughout the body through the nervous system, which is sensitive to magnetic fields. Brainwaves and natural biorhythms can be entrained by strong external ELF signals, such as stationary waves at the Schumann resonances. Entrainment, synchronization, and amplification promote coherent, large-scale activity rather than typical flurries of transient brain waves. Thus, resonant standing waves emerge from the brain, which, under the right conditions, facilitates internal and external bioinformation transfer via ELF, electromagnetic waves. These Schumann resonance waves exhibit non-local character and nearly instant communications capabilities worldwide. The EEG, or the electroencephalograph, measures brain waves of different frequencies within the brain. Rhythmicity in the EEG is a key variable in the coordination of cortical activity. Electrodes are placed on specific sites on the scalp to detect and record the electrical impulses within the brain. Frequency amplitude represents the power of the electrical impulses generated by the brain. Volume or intensity of brainwave activity is measured in microvolts. It is the number of times a wave repeats itself within 1 second. Now, it can be compared to the frequencies on a radio. So, let's see what we got here. Where did that one go? All right, here we go again. Raw EEG frequency bands includes gamma at 25 to 60 hertz along the Schumann resonance scale. Beta is 12 to 25 hertz. Alpha is 7 to 12 hertz, and theta is 4 to 7 hertz, and delta is less than 4 hertz. Okay, now their ranges overlap one another along the frequency spectrum by 0.5 hertz or more. Now, these frequencies are linked to behaviors, subjective feeling states, psychological correlations, etc. Now, clinical improvements with EEG biofeedback is traceable to improved neuroregulation in the basic function by appealing to their underlying rhythmic mechanisms. Schumann's resonance forms a natural feedback loop with the human mind and body. The human brain and body developed in the biosphere. Now, the EM environment conditioned by this cyclic pulse. So we are a part of our environment, which is where we developed, which is a product of the environment. Now, conversely, this pulse acts as a driver of our brains and can also potentially carry information. Functional processes may be altered and new patterns of behavior facilitated through the brain's web of inhibitory and excitatory feedback networks. Functional processes may be altered and new patterns of behavior facilitated through the brain's web of inhibitory and excitatory feedback networks. The brain has its own set of vibrations it uses to communicate with itself and the rest of the body. EEG equipment distinguishes these waves by measuring the speed with which the neurons fire in cycles per second. At their boundaries, these waves can overlap somewhat, merging seamlessly into one another. So different researchers may give slightly different readings for the ranges of the cycles per second. They may have a different number that they associate with the break between the alpha and the theta, and so on. Also, their equipment may be different, which means their readings may be slightly different based on the manufacturer of their equipment. The rate of cycling determines the type of activity, kindling wave after wave over the whole surface of the brain by igniting more neurons. Brainwave frequencies. Frequency bands and wave characteristics are described as follows. Right? Brain waves at 8 to 12 cycles per second. This brain wave indicates a relaxed state of mind. State of relaxed alertness, good for inspiration and learning facts quickly. A meditative mind. In this state, tap into the internal antenna-like qualities or visions, powerful ideas, mindless creation of the incredible, internal feelings and sensations. Okay. Theta brain waves of 4 to 8 cycles per second are deep meditation, right? Deep inward thoughts. This is associated with lifelike imagination, high states of mental concentration, a magical mind, internal pictures and visualizations, intuitions, inner guidance, dreams that appear to be very vivid and very real, access to the unconscious material, dream states. Studies have shown that learning in alpha state enhances the performance of students. It also develops the interest of studies in students more than they have ever learned in a tense environment, such as school. Frequent gaps of 2 to 3 minutes after every 30-minute study period relaxes their minds, and the alpha state will prove its efficiency with great ease and fun. But learning is more than just absorbing information. So changing the state of mind to operate in beta, alpha, and theta is most likely to produce the best learning, cognition, and creativity, while also staying in a relaxed state. Gamma waves of 25 to 60 Hz appear to relate to simultaneous processing of information from different brain areas, or those involving like memory, learning abilities, not actually learning itself, integrated thoughts, or information-rich task processing. Gamma rhythms modulate perception and consciousness, which disappear with anesthesia. Synchronous activity at about 40 Hz appears involved in binding sensory inputs into the single unitary objects that we actually perceive. Beta waves of 12 to 25 Hz dominate our normal waking state of consciousness when attention is directed towards cognitive tasks and those as the outside world or the 3D. Beta is a fast activity, present when we are alert or even anxious, or when engaging in problem solving, judgment, decision making, information processing, mental activities, and focus. Nobel Prize winner Sir Francis Crick and other scientists believe that the 40 Hz beta frequency may be the key to the active cognition. Back to alpha waves, 7 to 12 Hz, they are present during dreaming and light meditation when the eyes are closed. As more and more neurons are recruited to this frequency, alpha waves cycle globally across your whole cortex. This induces a deep relaxation, but not quite a meditation state. Now, in alpha, we begin to access the wealth of creativity that lies just below the conscious awareness. This is the gateway. This is the entry point that leads into deeper states of consciousness. Alpha waves aid overall mental coordination, calmness, alertness, inner awareness, mind-body integration, and learning. Alpha is also the home of the window frequency known as the Schumann Resonance, or the 7.83 Hz, which propagates with little attenuation across the planet. When we intentionally generate alpha waves and go into resonance with the Earth's frequency, we naturally feel better. We feel refreshed. We say that we are in tune, in sync. It is, in fact, environmental synchronization. Now, theta waves at 4 to 7 Hz occur most often in sleep, but are also dominant in the deepest states of meditation, where the body is asleep and the mind is actually awake. Now, and thought, which is the gateway to learning and memory. Now, in theta, our senses are withdrawn from the external world and focused on the mindscape internally originating signals. Theta waves are associated with mystery, an elusive and extraordinary realm we can explore. Right? It is that twilight state which normally only we experience fleetingly, and as we rise from the depths of delta upon waking, or as we're drifting off to sleep. In theta, we are basically in a waking dream. A vivid imagery flashes before the mind's eye, and we are receptive to information beyond our normal conscious awareness. Theta meditation increases creativity, it enhances learning and reduces stress and awakens intuition and other extrasensory perceptual skills. Delta waves, 0 to 4 Hz, are the slowest but are the highest in amplitude. They are generated in deepest meditation and dreamless sleep. Delta waves confer a suspension of external existence and provide the most profound feelings of peace. In addition, certain frequencies within the delta range trigger the release of a growth hormone, which is beneficial for healing and regeneration. This is why sleep, deep restorative sleep, is so essential to the healing process. So people that suffer from sleep apnea, people that don't get a restful sleep, this is not benefiting you. You're not healing. You're not regenerating your body as you're supposed to every day. Rhythm and harmonic resonance. There is a harmonic relationship between the earth and our mind and body. Right? Earth's low frequency isoelectric field, or the magnetic field of the earth, and the electrostatic field which emerges from our body are closely interwoven. Our internal rhythms interact with external rhythms, affecting our balance, REM patterns, health, and mental focus. Schumann resonance waves probably help regulate our body's internal clocks, affecting sleep or dream patterns, arousal patterns, and hormonal secretions such as melatonin. The rhythms and pulsations of the human brain mirror those of the resonant properties of the terrestrial cavity, which function as a waveguide. This natural frequency pulsation is not a fixed number, but an average of global readings, much like the EEG gives an average brainwave reading. Schumann resonance actually fluctuates like brainwaves due to the geographical location, lightning, solar flares, atmospheric ionization, and daily cycles. The most important slow rhythm is the daily rhythm sensed directly as the change in light. Rhythms connected with the daily rhythm are called circadian rhythms. An example is the pineal gland for melatonin secretions. So, some experiments in the absence of natural light have shown that a basic human clock is actually slightly longer than 1 day. So the human body clock is closer to 1 lunar day, or 24 hours and 50 minutes. So instead of the sun cycle, it's more of a lunar cycle. Also, through the pineal gland, I do have some other information on that in other videos. Please check those out if you're interested. There's a lot more information on that specific subject. Now, on a slower scale, a strong influence on the Earth is at the geomagnetic field, which is influenced by the following periods: the Moon's rotation of 29.5 days, the Earth's rotation of 365.25 days, the sunspot cycles, or 11 or 22 years, right? The nutation cycle of 18.6 years, the rotations of each individual planets, which range from 88 days to 247.7 years, and the galaxy's rotation cycle, which is about 250 million years. So these are very important rhythms. So like hormone secretions and the dominant nostril exchange are in the order of the 1 to 2 hours. Right? In the range of human EEG, we have the sun's electromagnetic oscillation of 10 hertz, while the Earth ionosphere system is resonant at frequencies in the theta, alpha, beta 1, and beta 2 bands. That was a lot of information, basically saying that as things rotate throughout the entire galaxy, it affects us all as we can affect it and them. So we are all connected. Now, different species often have internal generators of environmental rhythms, which can be extremely precise, up to 10 to 4. The frequency of these oscillators is the phase-locked loop synchronized with the natural rhythms. Now, environmental synchronization sources are often called Zeitbergs. The mechanism of optical synchronization can be shown. The present rhythms should inspire a better understanding of the interaction of internal and external rhythms during specific states of consciousness. The bioelectrical domain is geared toward the thalamocortical generation of rhythmic activity. In neurofeedback, what is being trained is the degree of rhythmicity of the thalamocortical regulatory circuitry. Rhythmicity manages the entire range of activation and arousal in the bioelectrical domain. One role advocated for rhythmic activity is that the time binding. The need for harnessing brain electrical activity, which is spatially distributed, while maintaining it as a single entity. Brain waves indicate the arousal dimension, and the arousal mediates a number of conditions. Changes in the sympathetic and parasympathetic arousal tune the nervous system to that particular changes in the sympathetic and parasympathetic arousal tune the nervous system. That's what they do. Now, under-arousal leads towards unipolar or reactive depression, attention deficit disorder, chronic pain, and insomnia. Over-arousal is linked with anxiety disorders, sleep onset problems, nightmares, hypervigilance, impulsive behavior, anger, aggression, agitated depression, chronic nerve pain, and spasticity. A combination of under-arousal and over-arousal causes anxiety and depression, as well as ADHD. Instabilities in certain rhythms can be correlated with nervous tics, obsessive compulsive disorder, aggressive behavior, rage, bruxism, panic attacks, bipolar disorder, migraines, narcolepsy, epilepsy, sleep apnea, vertigo, tinnitus, anorexia, bulimia, suicidal ideation and behavior, PMS, multiple chemical sensitivities, food sensitivities, diabetes, hypoglycemia, and explosive behaviors. The brain responds to inputs at certain frequency or frequencies. The computer can create waveform patterns or certain frequencies that compare with the mind's neural signals in terms of mind patterns. If people can control their mind patterns, then they can enter different states of being, such as alpha, mental relaxation, and study, etc. So if you can change your computer or your brain, you can change your state. How do you wish to feel rather than how something in the external world has affected you and triggered a specific feeling? So what happens when the mind is entrained with a sound or vibration that reflects the thought patterns? When the mind responds to certain frequencies and behaves as a resonator, there is a harmonic frequency that the mind vibrates or can attune to. What does the study of harmonic resonance, sound, or vibration have to do with the brain's frequency waves? Well, sound waves are examples of periodicity or rhythm. Sound is measured in cycles per second, or hertz. So when one hertz is equal to one wave or one single pulse per second, that's 1 hertz, right? So each cycle of a wave is in reality a single pulse of sound. The average range of hearing for the human ear is somewhere between 16 hertz and 20,000 hertz. We cannot hear extremely low frequencies, but we can perceive them as rhythmic. I have another chart in here that's similar but different. I want everybody to understand this as well, as it is very, very important. You can't see something, it doesn't exist. Now, this is the chart for the measurement of light. The human being can see in only one spectrum of light. So just as I just spoke on the hearing, we can only see in the spectrum of light, the one spectrum of light. Such as, for instance, a cat or a dog or another animal, they have night vision. It expands their range of sight. Okay? So please understand that, let's say, for instance, a theory that I have, not related to this paper, is a Bigfoot or the UFO sightings. Maybe it's to the event that maybe our vibration is changed, or maybe the Schumann resonance is changed so that the light frequencies that we can perceive has changed. Or walkers between worlds, such as Bigfoot, slip in and out of the different dimensions so that we can actually perceive them in our frequency spectrum of light. Theory, mine. Maybe somebody else's too, but we'll stick to that. I don't have any names other than mine that I put to that. Now, back to this. Entrainment is the process of synchronization, where vibrations of one object will cause the vibrations of another object to oscillate at the same rate. External rhythms can have a direct effect on the psychology and physiology of the listener. Slower tempos from 48 to 70 beats per minute have been proven to decrease heart and respiratory rates, thereby altering the predominant brainwave pattern. Binaural beats are continuous tones of subtly different frequencies delivered to each ear independently in stereo via headphones. Now, if the left channel's pitch is 100 cycles per second And then the right channel's pitch is 108 cycles per second. The difference between the two equals 8 cycles per second. So when these sounds are combined, they produce a pulsating tone that waxes and wanes in a basic wah, 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 wah rhythm. Binaural beats are not an external sound. Rather, they are subsonic frequencies heard within the brain itself. These frequencies are created as both hemispheres work simultaneously to hear sounds that are pitched differentiated by key mathematical intervals. So the brain waves respond to these oscillating tones by following them, which is entrainment, and both hemispheres begin to work together. Communication between the two sides of the brain is associated with the flashes of creativity, insight, and wisdom. So as these binaural beats are set up externally, the actual binaural beat, so the separate frequencies are the external stimulus to encourage the binaural beat of the 8 hertz in this example. And communication between both sides of the brain is associated with these flashes of creativity. Think Nikola Tesla. Insights, right? Think Plato or other inventors, right? Insight and wisdom. All the philosophers of the ages. Now, alpha wave biofeedback is considered a consciousness self-regulation technique, while alpha frequency binaural beat stimulation, frequency following response, or FFR, is a passive management technique where cortical potentials entrain to a resonate at the frequency of an external stimulus. Right? So the external stimulus, again, is the 100 hertz and the 108 hertz, where the binaural sound is the 8 hertz. Now, when the goal is alpha, either in meditation or in biofeedback, it means in training with the primary Schumann resonance through these self-regulating or specific cortical rhythms. We begin to control those aspects of consciousness which is associated with that specific rhythm. Now, measuring changes in Schumann resonance. Earth's background base frequency or heartbeat of Gaia is the Schumann resonance, right? This fluctuates but is not rising dramatically despite the New Age meme that alleges it as such. The authors have been unable to substantiate a rising Schumann resonance in the literature, and Ben Lonetree's readings directly contradict it. Schumann resonance is stable, it is not rising, though it varies between geographical regions. Of course, for decades the overall measurement has remained 7.8 cycles per second globally. So if you're in a valley, it could be different. If you're at the top of a mountain, it could be different. Right? This was once thought to be a constant. Global military communications were developed using this frequency. Now, I love Greg Braden. Great guy. Great guy. He has brought more attention to the Schumann resonance by stating something that is not necessarily backed by scientific fact. However, I would still say that in that meme that he was coined and presented to everybody or the world is kind of not accurate. Love you, Greg. Sorry, man. It's not accurate. You want to talk to me? Give me a call. Hit me up. Comment below. Whatever. So, I'm not trying to... Well, I am debunking Greg's statement. However, I appreciate his statement as it brought more attention to the Schumann resonance and this paper. It prompted me to make this, to research this paper. Now, as previously stated, the Earth behaves like an enormous electrical circuit. The atmosphere is actually a weak conductor, and if there were no sources of charge, its existing electrical charge would diffuse away in about 10 minutes, globally. Now, there is a cavity defined by the surface of the Earth that at the inner edge of the ionosphere whose height fluctuates somewhat. It's been calculated that at any moment the total charge residing in the cavity is about 50 3,000 colcums. Now, there's a vertical current flow between the ground and the ionosphere of 1 to 3 by 10 to 12 amps per square meter. The resistance of the atmosphere is about 200 ohms. The voltage potential is 200,000 volts. There are about 2,000 lightning storms at any given moment. Worldwide, each produces 0.5 to 1 ampere, and these collectively account for the measured current flow of the Earth's electromagnetic cavity. Right? Schumann's resonances are quasi-standing wave electromagnetic waves that exist in the cavity. Like waves on a string, they must be potentiated or excited in order to be observed, such as a piano. You have to strike the key in order to listen to the sound. They're not caused by internal terrestrial factors or Earth's crustal movements or the core, which does produce a magnetic field of their own. Now, these seem to be regulated to electrical activity in the atmosphere, particularly during times of intense lightning activity, so long as the properties of Earth's magnetic cavity remain about the same. Now, these frequencies remain the same. Presumably, there is some change due to the solar sunspot cycle as the Earth's ionosphere changes in response to flares and mass ejections during the 11-year cycle of solar activity, and high-energy charges coming off the sun brush across the upper atmosphere, thereby ionizing it there. So, since the Earth's atmosphere carries a charge or a current and a voltage, it is not surprising to find such electromagnetic waves. The resonant properties of the terrestrial cavity were first predicted by Schumann in 1952, 1957, and first detected by Schumann and Koenig in 1954. Much of the research in the last 20 years has been conducted by the U.S. Department of the Navy, which uses ELF signals for communication with submarines. However, little attention is given by the military and defense contractors to issues psychobiological health and wellness and well-beings of the sailors and of the rest of the planet, to include the sea life therein. Between the nearly perfect conducting terrestrial surface and the ionosphere, a resonating cavity is formed. Broadband electromagnetic impulses, like those from lightning flashes, fill this cavity and create globally the so-called Schumann resonance at frequencies in the range of 5 to 50 hertz. And that's from Schumann in 1952, Bilkin et al. in 1980, Sentman in 1987. The nominal average frequencies observed are 7.8, 14, 20, 26, 33, 39, and 45 hertz, with a slight diurnal variation. That's by Sentman and Fraser in 1991. Standard magnetometers are not able to measure Schumann's resonances. And even though the search coil, i.e. the pulsations, right, the magnetometers, which most often sample at about 0.1 hertz, do not allow such studies. Special equipment is thus needed, for example, see Sentman and Fraser in 1991. So the current findings suggest Schumann's resonances are actually observed by experiment to emerge at several frequencies related to brain waves. They range between 6 and 50 cycles per second, specifically 7.8 hertz for the alpha, 14 hertz for the low beta, 20 hertz for the mid beta, 26 hertz for the high beta, 33 hertz for the low gamma, and 39 hertz for the gamma, and 45 hertz for the higher gammas, with daily variation of about plus or minus 0.5 hertz. The strongest, number 2, the strongest of the 7 resonances is the 7.83 hertz in the alpha brainwave range, which is where we need to be for relaxation, right? If the rise in the resonance continues, this primary resonance, or the earth pulse, changes from subband low alpha of 7 to 10 hertz to the subband high alpha of 10 to 12 hertz, perhaps influencing our ability to relax deeply, balance and integrate our mind-body connection. It could influence REM, sleep, and dreaming. And if it continues to rise, it will breach the threshold into the fast beta activity, or the low beta of 12 to 15 hertz. It's associated with a lack of focused attention, and it indicates attention deficit disorder. So is the Schumann resonance rising? Can you relax? Or is it external stimulus that's causing your agitations? You're not in tune or in sync with the actual Schumann's resonance of 7.83 hertz. 3. The amplitude, or the intensity, of the Schumann's resonance is not constant and appears to be extremely dependent upon tropical and hence global temperatures. Indeed, preliminary results seem to indicate that a mere 1 degree increase in temperature correlates with the doubling of the Schumann resonance. Now, this could not be more significant, as it is unknown what psychobiological effect these fluctuations will have or could have on humans. So, you saw this coming. Check out those temperature changes, baby. So, Schumann resonance and global temperature changes. I switched the slide to the left here for common symptoms during spikes. So if you're experiencing these symptoms, it could have something to do with the Schumann resonance herself. So one of the most crucial questions in science today centers on whether or not the planetary temperature is rising, falling, remaining unchanged, whatever it's supposed to be. The whole global warming thing. Now, has been acknowledged by most in the field, and humans' interference or technologies are implicated. Yet, there is evidence that the whole solar system is heating with the solar cycle. On one hand, analysis of thermometer measurements of near surface or global land and sea air temperatures suggest the planet has been warming in recent decades, but satellite measurements of the planet's lower atmospheric temperature shows no warming from 1979 to 1998. Temperature data from weather balloons launched throughout the world reveal variations and trends in global temperatures that correspond to those found in these satellite-based measurements. Analysis of pressure thickness measurements for these same balloons also show no warming in recent decades. It's no wonder we have such an ongoing heated debate, that's funny, heated debate about the recent temperature history of the Earth, which only extends back about 50 years. Or to 1950, sorry, a little bit more than that. Yet, most people recognize that their local weather is markedly different than in past decades. Scientists have suggested lately that another method may exist to monitor planetary temperatures accurately. The idea is simple, though the underlying physics of the process is complex. The method is based on a well-known fact that thunderstorms and lightning strikes in many parts of the world are directly related to lower atmospheric air temperatures. Higher temperatures produce more lightning strikes, while lower temperatures tend to depress the lightning activities. Now, lightning discharges occurring anywhere in the world produce electromagnetic pulses that spread away from the source. Much of the energy is quickly degraded by some of the energy the lightning produces falls extremely low frequency or low wavelength domain of the electromagnetic spectrum. At these long wavelengths, the energy from a lightning strike is able to circumnavigate the Earth without serious degradation. Now, this low frequency / long wavelength energy creates Schumann resonance signals which can be detected throughout the world. Understanding Schumann resonance waves requires a basic appreciation of the vertical structure of the atmosphere. In the upper reaches of the ionosphere, incoming ultraviolet radiation and soft X-rays affect atoms or bonded groups of atoms, causing gains or losses of negatively charged electrons. This interaction creates an environment of positively and negatively charged particles of the high atmosphere that, among other interesting qualities, can readily conduct electricity. Okay. The bulk of our insulating atmosphere lies between two conducting layers of the Earth's surface and the lower boundary of the ionosphere. This spherically concentric cavity, or the Earth's ionosphere cavity, is bonded by those electrically conducting walls. Again, lightning discharges within the cavity produce electromagnetic pulses that spread away from the source in the extremely low frequency domain, and the conductive walls of the cavity produce some interesting effects for the low frequency energy. So, for example, energy within a frequency near 7.5 hertz would have a wavelength of about 40,000 kilometers. So recall that that's the wavelength is the speed of light on frequency. Because this wavelength equals the circumference of the Earth, the energy is able to circumnavigate the Earth ionospheric cavity without serious degradation. The 100 or so lightning bolts occurring each second in the 1,000 lightning storms around the world contribute to this energy in the 7.5 hertz portion of the spectrum, which can be measured anywhere on the planet. It is these resonant properties of this global spherical capacitor or resonator that Schumann predicted over 40 years ago. In the article published in Science, MIT scientist Earl Williams, 1992, constructed a powerful argument that links the Schumann resonances to convection and ultimately to the widespread tropical and/or global temperature. Williams concluded that a 1 degree Celsius warming in the tropics should result in a fourfold increase in the lightning activity, and he presented empirical data from several locations to support his conclusion. He noted that any measurable parameter nonlinearly related to temperature could be extremely useful in assessing the most subtle change in the global temperature. Others have presented different sensitivities, like Price in 1993 concluded that 1 degree centigrade warming would increase the global lightning activity by 7%. Price and Rind in 1994 found it as a 5 to 6% increase per 1 degree centigrade sensitivity, while Reeve and Tomey in 1998 found the sensitivity to be nearer to 40% per 1 degree centigrade. Now, regardless of the exact sensitivity, all these scientists conclude that lightning increases with even moderate amounts of warming worldwide. More lightning would generate a stronger Schumann resonance, which may be useful in monitoring planetary temperatures. The link between Schumann resonance and the number of lightning strikes is also supported by a mean day-night temperature fluctuational pattern. A diurnal pattern of worldwide lightning exists within 3 maxima recorded regularly due to the large number of mid to late afternoon thunderstorms in land areas of Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia and Australia. So storms are first generated in Asia, later they form in Africa, and later every day they arise in South America. Global warming has been linked to suspected rise in the Schumann resonance, and it's a threat to its synchronization with our brain patterns. Small changes in temperature pump up into large signals in the ELF frequency resonances. Long-term monitoring and study of global climate change via the measurements of the ELF waves needs to be conducted more closely. Monitoring the intensity and frequency of these lightning-induced ELF Schumann resonances could help monitor changes in the Earth's climate over time. One Israeli program proposed setting up 2 or 3 widely spread out, separated ELF field sites. A suggested site for a permanent SR monitoring station was in the Negev desert in Israel. Members for this protocol wanted to develop, to test, and install the appropriate software for automatic electromagnetic monitoring and preliminary processing of that incoming data. They suggested that simultaneous measurements and locations could be set up in Russia or Sweden to test the global nature of the ELF signals measured in Israel. The continuous ELF data measured in Israel could be compared with other ELF data sets from other locations around the world, such as Hungary, the USA, Japan, etc. Furthermore, the relevant global climate data sets, such as surface temperature, satellite observations of the global distribution of deep convection, and the global atmospheric water vapor measurements, could be used for comparison with the Schumann resonance data to check the reliability of the global thermometer hypotheses. A systematic study of Schumann resonance parameters during high-energy particle precipitation events have shown that protons and electrons with the energies above 1 MeV ionize the upper boundary of the Earth/ionospheric cavity. This leads to an increase in the resonant frequency and a decrease in the dampening of the first Schumann resonance, the first mode of the Schumann resonance at the 7.83 Hertz, as derived from the measurement at arrival heights in Antarctica. The study used the 9 strongest solar proton events of the past solar cycle 22 and the high-energy electrons emitted periodically from co-rotating interaction regions in the solar wind during 1994-1995. The variation of the Schumann resonance parameters is qualitative agreement with the current Schumann resonance theories. The study also showed the high-energy particle precipitation, or solar ejecta, is not the only relevant source affecting Schumann resonance patterns. The findings constitute a so far little explored aspect of the solar-terrestrial interaction. Now, that's all the data for you. In a discussion for this paper, right? The conclusion for this section is that it's postulated that we are complex, electrodynamic, rather than merely just chemical beings, sensitive to natural and artificial EM fields. 2, Schumann resonance frequencies coincide with human brain waves, affecting subtle and gross brain wave generation, regulating homeostasis, healing, and psychic abilities. 3, there's a strong correlation between human behavioral disturbances and the geomagnetic field turbulence or isolation from the Schumann resonance frequencies. As human beings, we have an extraordinary potentials that we have hardly begun to study, much less understand or identify. Creative gifts, intuitions, and talents that are unpredictable or emergent may become stabilized in generations to come and more widespread. Hopefully, we can learn to understand both our emergence from an essentially electromagnetic environment and facilitate our potential for healing, growth, and non-local communication. Further research on these electromagnetic relationships is essential, perhaps even to our psychophysical survival and our species. They affect our minds, the cellular and genetic structures of our bodies, our sleep and dream cycles, our emotions, perhaps even our spirit. Monitoring and collating these effects of atmospheric tamperings and their potential influence on the ionosphere and the Schumann resonance, therefore, human brainwaves and health should be continued. We are currently in solar cycle 24 and should use an entire 11-year cycle to acquire accurate data results, as Hainsworth has suggested. Now, these interferences, such as the HARP devices, they're more than one, they're worldwide. Bill Gates deciding to try to block out the sun without telling anybody the problems with it. These things are going to affect the Schumann resonance and therefore have a dramatic effect on the human body through the Schumann resonances. And therefore it's going to isolate the Earth from the rest of the galaxy through whatever means that you're going to block out the sun with. You're going to block out the sun, you're going to change the basic frequencies of our entire being and our collective consciousness. So, A team of researchers and physicists compiled relevant data under the auspices of the Journal of Non-Locally and Remote Mental Interactions, JNL-RMI, edited by Leon Sidorov. Then they hypothesized that the EM fields outside of the body are crucial for our consciousness. Finnish physicist Matt Pikkanen developed a model of physics called topological geometrodynamics, or TGD, highlighting the close relationships of human physiology with Schumann resonance and other ELF and electromagnetic patterns. Pikkanen believes that not only globally but interplanetary and interstellar magnetic fields are of great importance for the conscious life. His explanations involve magnetic flux tubes, a dipole-like part of a field, a wide range of EM waves, in particular microwaves and radio waves, are likely key elements in homeostasis, remote mental interactions between cells and other structures, and sensory representation, as well as in remote mental interactions both within and outside of the body. He explains that the noise level of Earth's magnetic field must be low for anomalous cognition, also called ESP or psi, to occur. Alan Frey suggested similar field notions decades ago, speaking specifically of microwave range inputs. These EM fields are only correlations of consciousness. Still, TGD allows the possibility of assigning someone's field body a topological field quanta identity. Pikkanen also suggests these fields and waves are influential when biological systems perform quantum computation-like processes. His biophysics suggests that neural circuits and molecules are bound by lock-and-key mechanism through this process of magnetic circulation, or topologically quantized dipolar magnetic fields. Pikkanen even sees Earth's magnetic field as a quantized dipolar magnetic field interaction of knotting, linking, and complex twisting. TGD views the brain and nervous system as a sensory organ for our extended electromagnetic selves, which have a length scale at least the size of the Earth's diameter. He suggests further that psi phenomena and distant healing may involve transfer of specific electromagnetic frequencies through the Planck length wormholes and join along boundaries postulated by TGD, which would allow for the near-instant transfer of information. The magnetic sensory canvas hypothesis provides a mechanism for sharing qualia associated with distant points on the geomagnetic sphere, essentially a form of cognitive entanglement between operator and target. Now, one clever agenda for TGD over the models of subtle energy transmission is that EM fields are not directly carried from sender to target, but they're simultaneously generated at the two locations by a vacuum, or a geometrical current. Hence, they remain coherent while bypassing the paradox of non-attenuation with distance. The illusion of our locality is perpetuated by the data fed to us by our senses. That is, those perceptions we habituated to pay attention to. Sight, smell, taste, yeah. And that's from Sidorov in JNL-RMI. Other research suggests the fundamental interactions of internal and external fields is the right track. Joseph Jacobson of 2002 at MIT found a way to switch cells off and on with radio waves. His team also unzipped and manipulated DNA with a radio frequency pulse. The same approach worked on proteins as well, and proteins orchestrate nearly all cellular chemical processes. Further, in JNL-RMI, Volume 1, Number 3, 2002, physicist Peter Garriev has proposed a wave-based genome whose main information channel is the same for both biphotons and radio waves. In 1973, Miller, Webb, and Dickinson described DNA as a holographic projector. In other words, genes encode and express themselves via light and radio waves, or acoustical holography from Miller, and Webb in JNL-RMI in 2002. Delocalized interference patterns create calibration fields or blueprints for our body's space-time organization. The system works as a biocomputer, specifically a wave biocomputer. DNA can also function as a gel-like liquid crystal emitting a weak laser-like light that can be converted into an electrico-acoustical signal. Later research by Peter Garriev and Mei Wan Ho substantiated electromagnetic models of life. Now, conclusion for this section is, like water bouncing off of rocks and other submerged objects, this non-specific Schumann resonance frequency is absorbed and re-radiated in unique interference patterns by all objects it encounters. This interference pattern is a composite of external and internal properties as the constituent atoms, molecules, and their global assembly all retransmit this energy according to their specific configurations. These sounding waves can be frequency and pattern modulated by conscious intent. And in order to yield a specific information or interference patterns. Decoded by the brain, they return almost instantly on the back of the Schumann resonance. Once recaptured, the patterns are then decoded by the brain. In this Fourier-type transformation, the information is translated into conscious data, much like other sensory processes. Right? Conversely, specific effects may be imprinted as bioinformation and made to exercise a mysterious action at a distance once the signal waves reaches the target. That pattern, in turn, may, under the right prerequisite global conditions, avoid routine dissipation and become instead coupled to the dominating state of consciousness, standing wave that is picked up and carried by the Schumann resonance, which pretty much travels almost at the speed of light, almost instantaneously around the world. Now, mental intent may function as a variable window of transmissions or reception in the exchange of extrasensory information. Tuned into the Schumann resonance, it may carry such bioregulating information to distant targets and act as a primitive radar-type sensory interface. So if my intent is to heal somebody somewhere in the world, it has been scientifically proven, and the theory is that I can heal that individual. Do I know the individual? I don't necessarily have to. Do I have to touch the individual? Absolutely not. It's carried through the Schumann resonances to that individual to fix or remodulate the cells themselves. Now, in conclusion, again, the postulation with these individuals throughout this paper, which I kind of agree with since I put it all together. Now, the organization of all biological systems is established by complex electrodynamic fields. We are fundamentally electromagnetic rather than chemical beings. As I mentioned earlier, wave interaction is a key determinant of biological structure and in optimal functioning. Biosystems are sensitive to natural and artificial electromagnetic fields. Perturbations in environmental fields can induce changes in organisms informed by those fields. Field frequencies and amplitudes affect our biodynamic state. So any fluctuations in these frequencies can have dire effects on the human and on our biodynamic state, such as HAARP, such as blocking out the sun. 2. ELF frequencies of Schumann's resonance are intimately linked with those of human brainwaves. Naturally or artificially induced changes in Schumann resonance affect subtle and perhaps gross brainwave generation. Now, in particular, it could lead to changes in patterns and frequencies of resonance and resulting phenomena such as homeostasis, REM, psychics, healing, and other abilities. For a decade, Robert Beck researched the brainwave activity of healers from all cultures and religious backgrounds. So he enumerates psychics, shamans, dowsers, Christian healers, seers, ESP readers, kahuna, Santeria, Wicca practitioners, and many others. Independent of their belief systems, each exhibited nearly identical EEG signatures during their healing moments at 7.8 to 8 Hz brainwave activity, which lasted from 1 to several seconds, and of which was phase and frequency synchronized with the Earth's geoelectrical micropulsations in that area or local area, also known as the Schumann resonances, and that's from Sidorov from JNL-RMI. Liquid crystals, or DNA brainwave ventricles and cellular structures in the human body may operate as antenna for detecting and decoding such global and local ELF signals. Beale in 1996 proposed that liquid crystals, which are an intrinsic part of cell membranes, act as a detector or amplifier or memory storage device for ELF and EM patterns within the environment. Proteins tend to orient themselves in the 10HX resonant EMF, so would be extremely sensitive to ELF changes in the 10 Hz region. A coherent wave field may emerge from the body's own liquid crystal matrix. That's right, we have a liquid crystal matrix. We mentioned that earlier when we were talking about DNA. The very structure and organization of living tissues is, however, itself regulated by that master molecule of the DNA. Now, the genetic system consisting to be more accurate of a equidirectional translational function, which may start equally well with the DNA and RNA or protein. Now, it reveals itself as a complex, multidimensional code with both local codon and global context, material nucleotide, and field-like EM hologram parameters, all of which are mutually interdependent and at the same time subject to external environmental influences. That's from Sidorov, also JNL RMI. There's number 3. Yeah, that was only number 2. Yeah. Number 3, there is a strong correlation between behavioral disturbances in humans and periods of solar and geomagnetic field turbulence. Conversely, studies show that subjects living in isolation from geomagnetic rhythms over long periods of time develop increased irregularities and chaotic physiological rhythms, which were dramatically restored after introduction of a very weak 10 Hz electrical field. This is the NASA research of the early astronauts suffering until the Schumann resonance generators were installed in their spacecraft. 4. Geomagnetic anomalies such as tectonic strain, earth lights, or geomagnetic field perturbations, they can induce some forms of anomalous cognition such as auditory and visual hallucinations and TLTs, temporal lobe transient of small seizures. Also, one of the effects of meditation is to quiet the mind. Actually, meditation means to become familiar with yourself, actually. Now, as a method of allowing the free run or silent thalamic periods to become entrained by natural geophysical rhythms. This form or tuning of the magnetoreception is mediated by the pineal gland because 30% of its cells are magnetically sensitive, and organic magnetite containing tissues. Persinger in 1989 points out that deep temporal lobe activity exists in equilibrium with the global geomagnetic condition. When there is a sudden decrease in geomagnetic activity, there appears to be an enhancement of processes that facilitate the psychic reception, especially the telepathy and clairvoyance. Now, increases in geomagnetic activity may surpass the pineal melatonin levels and contribute to reductions of cortical seizure thresholds. Indeed, melatonin is correlated with temporal lobe related disorders such as depression and seizures. That's from researcher Krippner. Number 5, optimal global ELF, which is a calm night, low sunspot activity, low EM pollution. Conditions can facilitate anomalous cognitions, including psi, such as ESP, remote viewing, and remote healing. Psi is present in space and time, waiting to be accessed by crisis, emotion, or by optimal laboratory stimulus parameters. Now, geomagnetic activity may affect the detection capacity of the brain for this type of information, especially the neural pathways that facilitate the consolidation and conscious access to the information. Without this geomagnetic activity, awareness of the psychic stimulus may not be as likely, as the brain's latent reserve capacities would not be utilized. And that's from Krippner. So please understand that any perturbations or external stimulus that affect the Schumann resonance frequencies by man, by harp, by whatever, blocking out the sun, is going to have a catastrophic effect to the human brainwave patterns, thereby affecting our consciousness and our connection to the earth itself and to the whole universe. Possibly, I don't know, put in the comments below what you think could happen if we're disconnected from the universe. If the Schumann resonance is the frequency or the radio station that's giving the information for our cells to do what they need to do on a natural basis, what happens when that's interrupted? Now, also, brain waves, particularly in the alpha range, can be transmitted along the perennial system or via the frolic excitation to any distal part of the body and even to the adjacent organisms via ELF and EM waves. These frequencies can be amplified by closely related Schumann resonance waves or by feedback mechanisms, typically of the body's physiological pathways, which is attuned to the immunologic and the neuroendocrinolic cascades. In turn, these basic frequencies can reactivate stalled healing processes, enhance growth, accelerate immune responses, and generally just jumpstart functions inherent to the body's tissues by rebalancing its energies, according to Oriental medicine, or in Beale's terminology, by reconfiguring the liquid crystal orientation of the cell membrane components and thus triggering specific intracellular responses. The article concurs with Picatin and Sidorov, since I got the information from those guys, that the Schumann resonance may be the substrate for a radar-type extrasensory perception mechanism common to all living beings. Now, I use the radar-like extrasensory perception mechanism because it's something you all can relate to. This is technology beyond our understanding. I'm trying to relate it to 3D occurrences out in the matrix world. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, like water bouncing off of rocks and other submerged objects, this non-specific frequency is absorbed and re-radiated in unique interference patterns by all objects that it encounters. Now, when they're natural objects and beings, you have to understand it's not really an interference. It's more of a, they interfere with the signal, yes, but they also contribute their power back to the signal and thus is redistributed throughout the globe and possibly even the cosmos and the universe. So this interference pattern is a composite of external and internal properties as the constituent atoms, molecules, and their global assembly all retransmit this energy according to their specific configuration. Now, not only that, but the sounding waves can be frequency and pattern modulated by conscious intent in order to yield specific information or inference patterns. Now, they're decoded by the brain. They return almost instantaneously on the back of the Schumann resonance, which we already discussed was instantaneously traveled worldwide due to the cavitational resonance throughout the system. Now, once recaptured, the patterns are then decoded by the brain. This is the Fourier type transformation of the information is translated into the conscious data, much like other sensory processes. Not our regular 5 or 6 senses, the other sensory processes. Now, conversely, specific effects may be imprinted as bioinformation and made to exercise a mysterious action at a distance once the signal wave reaches the target. Now, that pattern, in turn, may, under the right prerequisite global conditions, avoid routine dissipation and become instead coupled to the dominant state of consciousness, standing wave that is picked up and carried by the Schumann's resonance. Mental intent may function as a variable window transmission reception in the exchange of extrasensory information. Tuned into the Schumann resonance, it may carry such bioregulating information to distant targets and act as a primitive radar-type sensory interface. Now, all these and more mechanisms depend on the Schumann resonance frequencies staying within their median range. In a prior First Thoughts essay that discussing the presence of the Schumann frequencies in the EEG during various healing practices, we have proposed that mental intent might function as a variable window or transmission reception in the exchange of extrasensory information, which tuned into the Schumann resonance to carry such bioregulating information to distant targets and acted as a primitive radar-type sensory interface. This is from Sidorov in 2001. However, pursuing this line of thought soon led to the landmark experiments of Robert Becker, who, it became evident, not only had reached somewhat similar conclusions based on his own body of evidence, but had gone beyond them to suggest that such subtle currents could reach far deeper into our genetic and consciousness control mechanisms. After nearly 8 decades of EEG and other brain imaging studies, it is sobering to realize that we still cannot tell with certainty where EEG voltages come from. Becker in 1985, paragraph 88, page 88. Now, it's conceivable that Becker's perennial system and or the liquid crystal matrix of the organism, including but not limited to the connective tissue, cell membranes, and DNA, right, might act as a full body array of sensory receptors for Picatin's magnetic sensory canvas signals with specific excitation patterns coding for different types of information. Now, the body's ubiquitous liquid crystal arrays and their almost infinite configuration possibilities make them a top candidate for the primary sensory receptors that the parapsychology arena has been looking for. It is even conceivable that DNA phase conjugation properties, see Pop and Chang of 1998, they allow it to function as a multi-mode antenna, altering its function according to the surrounding signal fields and possibly acting not just as a regulatory program, but also an element of extrasensory perceptions. This is from Sidorov again. As human beings, We have an extraordinary potential. We have hardly begun to study, much less understand or imagine. Yes, we have superheroes out there that we imagine, but does it go beyond that? Is that an everyday occurrence for every individual? Creative gifts, intuitions, and talents that are unpredictable or emergent may become stabilized in generations to come. Now, hopefully, we can learn to understand both our emergence from an essentially electromagnetic environment and facilitate our own potential for healing, growth, and non-local communication. Now, pharmaceutical industries don't like that statement. How dare we not give them any money for their regulation of the disease management system. Now, disease means to not be at ease. Now, does this mean that when we are not in tune with the earth, Gaia, and nature, or in the alpha state, that we are not at ease? Beta frequencies of fight or flight, or the go, 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 go of today's matrix world and the fast-paced thinking and doing frequencies are literally over-vibrating or over-cycling the human body, causing it not to be at ease. I want to thank the Stillness in the Storm for their help in this, and also everybody else that I mentioned herein. It's a lot of information over the course of 2 hours and freaking 35 minutes. So, thank you all for listening. If you're still awake, hey, smash that like button and subscribe below if you learned something, agreed, or found this interesting. Comment below and ask an educated question that you want the answer to. This is a 2.5-hour video. I'll probably answer your question somewhere in the past, 2.5 hours. But if not, hey, shoot me a note. Now, if you love this sexy face, hit the notification bell for my next posting herein. Now, as Albert Einstein mentioned, the future of medicine will be the medicine of frequencies. See my video herein, and also the Schumann Resonance 7.83 Hertz, the short version, which does not have the type of information this one does. And of course, if you look off to the side there with old Otto, he has something to say too. And why are you taking medical and health advice from people who have a vested monetary interest when you are diseased? I love you all. I want to thank you for staying for the 2.5 hours and some change. Please, if you need to know, pass this video on and tell everybody, I guess. Peace, love, much joy and happiness, and Ho'oponopono.